This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. K-State crop entomologist Jeff Whitworth starts the show explaining the different moths that people could be seeing in Kansas. He notes how people can manage them. John Holman, K-State Cropping Systems and Forage Agronomist, and Logan Simon, K-State Extension Agronomist, keep the show rolling as they preview the upcoming K-State Forage Conference. Ending the show is K-State dairy specialist Mike Brouk, as he says the new technologies used to create lactose-free products are helping Kansas producers meet the demand of today's consumers. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Tuesday show with K-State crop entomologist Jeff Whitworth. Jeff, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Anytime.
Jeff, today wanting to talk about something you've once again been receiving a lot of questions about, moths, and what different types of moths are there in Kansas?
Oh, man, there's probably thousands of different types of moths in Kansas, but the ones that are of importance are the ones that affect us and our agriculture or our lawns and gardens and that kind of stuff. And I've been getting a lot of calls and a lot of pictures about several different kinds of moths in the last 5 to 7 days. So I thought we better explain the difference. And a lot of people saying, man, do I need to go out and spray now? Do I need to spray next year? I say, well, no, you don't need to spray now. You don't need to spray next year until next year happens and you go out and you determine that the treatment threshold of worms in your yard justifies it. So that's just my little kicker there about don't spray just for spraying itself. But back to the moths. The moths that are really seem to be causing a problem, especially in South Central Kansas, southeastern South Central Kansas, there's 3 different ones that I'm getting the most pictures of. The first is the green clover worm. Green clover worms, the moths, are the ones that are the smaller, darker, more aerodynamic looking. They look like an arrowhead when they're at rest. And when they don't, if you disturb them, they're very easily disturbed and they quickly move around. All these moths do. That's how they survive to mate again. But the green clover worm, very aerodynamic. It's dark brown, black spots, but it's arrowhead shaped. They are attracted to lights, and as everybody is out cutting their soybean fields right now, they're scaring up all these moths because that's where the majority of the green clover worms have been feeding all summer. There are 2 or 3 generations in Kansas. They feed on a broadleaf. They feed on clover or alfalfa or soybeans, where we generally have a problem with NOAAs in soybeans. So they're not going to be a problem in a yard if it's grass. You may have a few in a garden or something, but they're not going to make the thousands that we're seeing right now attracted to lights. That comes from the agricultural, basically soybean fields around the cities. But the thing everybody's wondering about, if those moths are there now, are they going to lay eggs? Have they laid eggs so that they're going to be in that field next year? No, they're not. They don't overwinter in Kansas. Now, remember, Shelby, when I say that, insects adapt and change all the time. But as of now, 2025, the majority of them don't overwinter in Kansas. They go on south, okay? So they're not going to lay eggs. They save all their reserves and everything. They head south. That's one of the reasons why you find bunches of them attracted to lights, because they're all migrating. And, the lights, whether it attracts them or whether it screws up their navigation, doesn't matter. They come to lights, and so they can be a little nuisance. So that's what we're seeing. Green clover worms are very aerodynamic, very quick. There's a lot of them right now. The other ones that we're seeing a lot of right now, there's 2 different species. One's a fall armyworm, and one is the yellow striped armyworm. There's not much difference in the moths. They're both kind of brown, heavy-bodied moths. Again, they're attracted to lights at night. Again, these 2 species don't overwinter in Kansas as far as we know. So if you have a bunch of them coming from a field that you're just cutting alfalfa. They can be in alfalfa or they can be in soybeans. If the moths are coming out of that field, they are not going to lay eggs. They're not going to be, just because they're there now doesn't mean they're going to be a problem in that field next year. It doesn't mean that they won't, because they come in from the southern part of the United States or the South America every early summer. So they might land in that field, but it's just a guess, right? So just because they're there now doesn't mean they're going to be there next year. So it doesn't do any good. A couple of guys asked, can I spray them down and kill the moths before they lay eggs? No, it doesn't do any good. You're just wasting your time. So those are the other two. Now we've had problems with fall armyworms all summer, and they'll eat anything. They feed on grasses. They've been a real problem in brome pastures throughout the southeastern and the central part of the state. So they can feed on grass in the yard, but they're not going to now. They're migrating, so it doesn't do any good to spray your yard now for either one of these pests. Okay, the yellow striped armyworm, again, that's another one that seems to be on the go, moving south. They don't overwinter in Kansas. Same thing with them. So you may have bunches of all three of these moths. It looks like a lot of them. They're all kind of brown, quick moving. They hide in the dark, and the flush when you open the door, open a window, they all fly out at you. So they look like they're the same, but they're three distinct different species. That's what the main problem is with the moths right now. Also, I've gotten a couple pictures of true armyworms and army cutworms. Now, there's a difference between these two. The true armyworm will overwinter in Kansas. We've had problems with true armyworms all summer also, in brome, in soybeans, in alfalfa, and right now there's quite a few armyworms in really late planted sorghum, double planted sorghum. It's just still succulent. The berries are just they're not at the soft dough stage yet. There's pretty good infestations of armyworms in those. The problem with that is they're going to crawl down and they're going to pupate. And then as the wheat germinates, if the weather's still warm, they're going to migrate to the wheat. And I've had years and years past where they've defoliated, fall wheat. It just depends on the year. They overwinter in Kansas, but it's going to take the mid-20s before they go into the overwintering. And they generally overwinter as a mature larvae. At least that's what I've always found them in. Now, they say they'll mature in any stage, or they'll overwinter in any stage, and they might, but the majority is the mature larvae. So I think, recently we've had some frost, some cooler weather in northwest Kansas. As that moves down this way, I'm hoping that will put the armyworms into the overwintering mode so they won't feed. But if not, if it stays open, I've seen them feed clear up until mid to late November if we have warm fall weather, and it's the moth that determines where the eggs are laid. So if the moth finds green wheat, she'll lay her eggs there. If the weather's still decent, the larvae can feed on the wheat. Remember, seed treatments, the guys say, well, I treated my wheat with insecticide. Doesn't work for the larvae, for the armyworm larvae, okay? And it only lasts a couple of weeks anyway. So if you planted now, or if you're planting now, by mid-November, you won't have any activity with your insecticide anyway. So that's the other moth that I want to talk about briefly has a little bit of different biology, is the army cutworm. Now, the army cutworm is the moth stage right now, but they're just returning from Colorado, and they are or from parts west where they oversummered in the mountains. They don't oversummer in Kansas. So they're returning back as they come from Colorado. They are laying eggs all the way in anything that's green. They'll eat anything that's green. As far as crops go right now, what's that? That's alfalfa and wheat for the most part. That's why we have alfalfa and wheat problems with army cutworms. Or if somebody has a nice yard that they've been irrigating, keeping green, they may lay eggs in that yard also, okay? They'll eat anything green. So that's the army cutworm. But they're going to feed all winter. Anytime the temperature is over 48 degrees or 45 degrees, then they're going to feed in March and April, and they're going to become adults around Memorial Weekend, and they're going to leave. They're going to head back to Colorado over summer. So that if you spray your yard in the summer, you're not going to kill the army cutworms. You're not going to kill most of these moths because they're not even there. Okay. So just because you have moths and they're attracted to your light now, basically it's because they're coming out by the millions from agricultural fields and they're heading south for overwintering and they just get disrupted by a light bulb or a shining light. So if you want to avoid the nuisance, and that's really all they are, it's just a nuisance, turn your lights off at night, make sure all the cracks and crevices are shut up, roll your windows up in your car because they like to get in there for some reason. And that will help you avoid them. Next morning, when you open your window or you turn off the light, they'll take off and they'll head south and you'll never see them again. So it doesn't really do any good to spray because you're not going to kill that many and they're not going to do anything anyway, other than they're just going to spend the night there and then they're going to head out. Okay. So that's the story right now with the moths that I've been seeing and I've been getting pictures of that are really, and they really are a nuisance. I've seen some pictures with pretty good populations of moths crawling around windows and on doors. And trust me, they don't want to be in there. They come in at night when it cools down because they feel a little heat coming from the house, but they don't want to spend the rest of the day in there. They want to get on their journey south where they can overwinter, and then they'll be back in the spring. The ones that overwinter in the southern hemisphere or someplace else, they usually get here about early June, mid-June, sometime like that, so they can cause problems then. So that's when you need to start watching your yards and making sure you don't have a population of worms. You want to spray the worms, not for the moths.
Jeff, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
My pleasure, anytime.
That was K-State crop entomologist Jeff Whitworth. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show discussing the upcoming K-State Forage Conference with K-State Cropping Systems and Forage Agronomist John Holman and K-State Extension Agronomist Logan Simon. John, Logan, thank you both so much for taking the time to join us today.
Shelby, always a pleasure.
Thanks, Shelby.
This K-State Forage Conference taking place on November 5th. And John, what is this conference?
Shelby, yeah, we're excited to offer this. Forages is really the backbone of a lot of our state's livestock industry, and so we have a dedicated conference to talk about quite a number of topics. And so it's a good portion of the day. Registration will start at 8:30, and we will be wrapped up by 4 o'clock that afternoon. And we're going to cover a lot of topics that day. The way we've organized this conference is it's going to be, relatively fast paced. We're going to cover a lot of material, kind of hit the highlights, but we've also got some time throughout the day to have some discussion and follow up questions that we don't get to throughout the course of the day. But just to touch on some of the things that we're going to be covering. We'll talk about a summary of a lot of our haying and grazing cover crop and annual forage research that we've done, and we have quite a few associated economics to go along with that to help producers make important management decisions. Along with that, we'll look at some of the long-term impacts of haying and grazing on soil health. We will cover how to manage prussic acid in our sorghums, and there is a new tool available to growers, and that is a Durin or prussic acid-free sorghum line that is coming available in the marketplace. It's just only been out on a few acres so far, so we will be talking about that. We will cover alfalfa and some of the things of how to manage alfalfa as far as irrigation and profitability is concerned. Legumes and alfalfa are really important for the crude protein they provide, but dryland production is especially in western Kansas is difficult. So we've been doing several years now of research where we've been growing some annual legumes, and we will present some findings on that. And those are some tools available to growers of what legumes they could look to grow to increase that crude protein content in their forage, because that is extremely important when we think about balancing the ration. We will cover forage fertility management, and as we know, inputs are high, so we will cover forage fertility management, and then and the economics associated with that. We've been done several years of research now also where we've been looking at different seeding rates of our warm season annual crops, and we have some revised recommendations coming out, and so that information will be presented. Part of our forage system is also that native rangeland, so we will have a topic on native rangeland. In particular, we will be covering some of the more difficult plants to deal with in native range, and that being silver bluestem, which is can be a real problem and is increasing in acres across the state, as well as western ragweed. We will talk about insurance options for either the forage crops, but also livestock prices are extremely high right now, and we will talk about some of the LRP and other livestock protection options available to growers. And then rounding out the program, KLA, Kansas Livestock Association, will provide us an industry and livestock update. So quite a lineup of different topics.
And a wide variety of speakers on these topics, including yourself and Logan, as well as Augustino Bohr, Scott Stagenborn, Nick Detter, Romulo Lolato, Keith Harmony, and Jenny Ift. And Logan, on your topic, looking at forage fertility, what will people get to hear as a preview of what you will be sharing?
Yeah, so as John had discussed, fertility is an important part of management in these forage systems, and especially right now when we know that input costs are high, a real focus needs to be put on efficiency in our fertilizer management and profitability. So we'll be talking about fertility management in a broad swath of our annual as well as perennial forages, particularly alfalfa. On the annuals, thinking about our warm season forages like your forage sorghums, as well as our cool season triticale and oats as well. Looking at all aspects of everything from taking your soil sample correctly to get good data to make your decisions on to actually going out and making that application. We'll also be talking about how this relates to nitrate toxicity, which can be a problem in some of our forages as well. So how management of our fertilizers and soil fertility then relates back to the nitrate side of things once that forage gets to the feed.
John, what topics will you be talking about?
Yeah, well, I'll have the pleasure to present some of the data that we've been collecting mostly in Western Kansas. We've got nearly 20 years of forage rotation data. So we've been looked at, dedicated forage systems, integrating forages into our traditional cropping system. So I will share some of that information as we think about kind of where the current price of wheat is at. It makes that difficult. But if we think about the value that wheat or that phase of the rotation can provide growers, does look promising where the current livestock prices are at. That looks, a way that producers can make money during that part of the rotation. So we will talk about a lot of different ways to integrate forages into the rotation and hopefully how to help producers increase their net returns at the end of the day.
Logan, who do you recommend take the time to attend this event?
Really, this conference is going to bring great information from the forage producer to the livestock feeder. So anyone and everyone engaged in ag in Western Kansas is going to find value joining us here for the K-State Forage Conference.
This conference, as I mentioned beforehand, taking place November 5th, starting at 8:30 and wrapping up at 4. But where is it taking place?
Great question. Yes, we want people to be able to find us. So this will be at the Kansas State University Southwest Research Extension Center there in Garden City. at 4500 East Mary Street. We do have an RSVP link. So, we do appreciate if people would go out and just, the Google KSU Forage Conference, they will find the website page. They will find that link. We will get you fed. We will feed everybody. So that's guaranteed, because we have some nice sponsors that are providing lunch. But giving us an idea of how many to expect would be helpful. So, but it is no cost to attend. We will provide you a lunch. We're appreciative to Kansas Forage and Grassland Council, American Egg Credit, and High Plains Farm Credit for providing a meal that day.
John, Logan, I appreciate you both taking the time to join us today.
Thank you, Shelby. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for having us on.
That was K-State Cropping Systems and Forage Agronomist John Holman, and he was joined by K-State Extension Agronomist Logan Simon as they discussed the K-State Forage Conference, which is taking place November 5th from 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. It will be held at the Southwest Research Extension Center, which is 4500 East Mary Street in Garden City. This event is free to attend and lunch is provided. However, they do request that you go ahead and get registered so they're able to better figure out their catering count. If you'd like to find out more information about this K-State Forage Conference, I will link it in today's show notes on agtoday.net, or you can go online to wkrec.org. If you still have questions, you can reach out to John at jholman@k-state.edu. That is JHOLMAN at k-state.edu. That will also be in today's show notes on agtoday.net. Another event that is coming up is taking place Wednesday, November 5th, and this is another webinar update on the current state of the Black Sea grain and oilseed markets with Antonia Boyaca, which is from the K-State Department of Agricultural Economics. This webinar is free, however, you are needing to register if you would like to be on the Zoom. If you aren't able to join the Zoom, there will be a recording posted afterwards. You can find more information about this webinar by going to agmanager.info. It is taking place on November 5th. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because we have more for you up ahead.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. Along with Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. We end today's program with this week's milk lines. An increase in lactose-free products is part of a broader consumer trend toward value-added dairy. K-State dairy specialist Mike Brouk discusses how Kansas producers are adapting to meet the demand of today's consumers.
Today I'd like to visit with our Kansas dairy producers and actually dairy consumers across the state about some trends that we're seeing in the sale of dairy products to consumers. On the farm, as we work 7 days a week to provide milk for dairy products that you're buying off the shelf in the store, it is part of our responsibility to understand how things are going to be utilized by the consumers. So we look at some of the recent trends in the purchasing of dairy products across the United States. It sheds some insight for our dairy producers as to what they need to consider as they look at the future of their dairy farms. So one of the bright spots that we have in dairy product consumption actually is lactose-free milk. I didn't understand a lot about the issue with lactose and digestive issues until my wife developed an issue with lactose several years ago, and then later, a couple of our daughters developed the same sort of situation. Not everybody in the United States can actually tolerate lactose, and for some, this is something that happens when they're very young, actually as babies. For many others, it happens when they're an adult or sometimes in their late teens. So it does create quite an issue for many people here in the United States. Over the years, we've looked at different ways to modify the lactose content of milk. One of the first was through utilizing enzymes to break it down before we put it into the jug or bottle for consumption by consumers. So lactose-free milk has been part of the grocery shelf for quite some time. However, we're starting to see some additional products head down that route as well so that we can provide products for consumers that do not contain lactose. One of the things that has, happened in our industry is we use a lot of filtration membranes to actually take raw milk and separate it into different components. And one of the things that we can do with the filtration systems we have available today is we can actually remove the lactose from skim milk. We can then take that skim and manufacture it into different products. As you look at the grocery shelf today, you'll be able to find yogurt that is lactose-free. You'll be able to find some ice cream products that are also lactose-free, in addition to many choices in beverage milk. And we're actually seeing some of the beverage milk use this same filtration to remove the lactose prior to bottling. So when you look at things like Fairlife, that's actually a filtered product where the lactose is removed by filtration and not through the use of enzymes. We see many changes going on. What impact has that had on the sale? Well, in 2024, there was an 8.4% increase in lactose-free milk sales across the United States. And as we see this growth continuing into 2025 and beyond, we expect that lactose-free milk sales become a higher percentage of the total milk volume as we go into the next few years. Again, this is all the result of changes in technology that we use in processing, as well as some changes in how we market products and increase the type of products that are actually lactose-free. So if you're a consumer and you're bothered by lactose in dairy products, be watching for those products that come onto the shelf that are actually lactose-free. And many of our cheeses have always been naturally lactose-free or very low in lactose. Things like aged cheddar cheese and other products like that are also part of the products that a person that is suffering from issues with lactose can consume. This is Mike Brouk with K-State Research and Extension, encouraging our dairy producers to keep current with what's going on in the marketing of dairy products, and thanks to our dairy consumers that are trying to utilize lactose-free products in their diets.
Thanks, Mike. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Whitworth. This is the K-State Radio Network.